Emil Cadlick here with FantasyNation.com. We have a wonderful pioneer of fantasy sports today. She had a long and very successful and very award-winning career in the adult entertainment business. And then now she has a fantasy sports radio show, which is one of the best radio shows on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. Very honored to introduce Lisa Ann. How are you today?
I'm doing great. You know, we're doing this interview at a very unusual time, and mostly affected is us with sports, but our lives kind of in a standstill. And I think it's a time like this where you can really create and also look back on all the incredible experiences that you've already had. So it's a unique time for us to be getting together and talking about this.
Well, it is. So what sports were interesting to you or a part of your life when you were young?
So growing up, my mom was a basketball mom for a local college, Lafayette University. And what that meant was she cooked for the home and away teams during every game. So after the game, the away team could have a home cooked meal before they got on their bus to get back. And so that was really the fiber of our life during basketball season, was going up to College Hill and going to every Lafayette home game, which I loved. It was such a great escape. Also, it became such a routine with the seasons, living in Pennsylvania and growing up with 4 seasons, kind of knowing, you know, that we had more time in the summer because we didn't have all these games. But I loved that that was part of my life in the school year, and it kept me very rhythmic with studies and things that I wanted to do. And on the other side, my dad and I would see, my dad had us on Sundays, my brother and I, and he was football. So we watched football every Sunday, and that was really how I got to understand the game. Also, my dad doesn't watch football with volume because he doesn't like sports broadcasters. So ironically, that's my deal. And so he would play Italian music or Kenny Rogers, who yesterday passed away.
Oh, I did not know
but that was what I grew up with, was only Italian music at my father's house. Kenny Rogers, and then strangely enough, he loved Diana Ross and Donna Summer.
Oh my God.
That was his range. Okay, that was his range. It was so bizarre. But I learned the game because if I had questions, I kind of had to wait till a commercial to ask my brother, what was that call? What was that play? What happened? But when you have to pay attention because you're not hearing what the calls were, what the penalty was, what happened, you learn the game.
Wow. That's interesting because I do that now occasionally, but I never really thought somebody would do it, a few years ago. That's fantastic.
Yes, so many years ago, and he just doesn't like people very much. So any broadcaster talking too much would drive him nuts.
So no Dionne Warwick for him, huh?
No Dionne Warwick and no radio. So, it was always neat for me to go to friends' houses and just listen to radio. And I was intrigued by the commercials and all of the things that came on radio because he didn't listen to radio even in the car. If we did listen to anything in the car, it was a game. It was a college football or professional football game. So that's what we'd listen to in the car. And that was just like on the way to church on Sunday.
So any favorite NFL teams back in the day for your dad or yourself?
Yes. Dad was a Dallas Cowboys fan.
Oh boy.
We were raised to be Dallas Cowboys fans. There was really no question about it. And, I grew up 45 minutes to an hour outside of Philadelphia and didn't realize till later in life what a big deal it was that we were Dallas Cowboys fans. I mean, people were truly offended. When I was in the workplace as a young teenager, as a hostess at a restaurant, I wasn't an Eagles fan. It was just people looked at you like it was expected that you lived there. And I'm like, yeah, no, my dad was a Dallas Cowboys fan at the time. He really loved Tom Landry. And there was just this mystique with the Dallas Cowboys that I think he really fell into.
So somewhere along the way, you learned about fantasy football. How did that happen?
I learned about fantasy football after I met Matt Deutsch. And Matt Deutsch is our boss at Fantasy Sports Radio at Sirius XM. And when I met Matt Deutsch about a show that he had previously had, some Playboy Playmates had a fantasy football show for quite a bit of time, and it did well. And I guess it had just broken up. And my producer from a show I was doing in LA that was not sports related said to me, hey, you should go to New York and you should meet up with Matt Deutsch and talk with him about this. This is probably a fit. So when I met Matt the first time, I didn't know fantasy yet, but I knew a ton of friends that played it. So my first thing was really to get an apartment in the city so I could be close to the studio, be more accessible, and, you know, really sit in on people's shows and also be able to be a guest and be able to just get to know Matt and our bosses and everybody here really well. And so I had friends that I was just like, just teach me how to draft. Just teach me how this works. Just teach me this. And I realized like it really is something that you're still going in each league differently. If it's your first year, you're looking at the scoring system. You're looking at the rules. Each league can uniquely explain itself as long as you understand the difference between drafting players that you love, expectancy for players, history reports, and thanks to the internet, I mean, I know that you've been playing fantasy a lot longer than I have, and I know that you've been playing since before the internet. So for someone like myself to come into a world where all of that information is so readily available to you, whether, you know, you're using the football diehards, whether you're just going on to ESPN's site and looking at player profiles and the basics of how many games per season have they played, how productive have they been, like, I really, you know, I read a ton of books that summer on how fantasy sports ignited, different writers that covered fantasy sports. And I realized how different it was when stats had to be taken care of by the commissioner and sent in the mail. And there had to be a real honor system between these league mates and their commissioner. I mean, I don't know if we'd have the trust now that we had 25 years ago to have someone in the league be the commissioner. Like
Yeah.
collusion is different in today's world, right? More doggy dog, all for themselves world we're living in right now. So I took that summer. I studied. Matt had me do a demo show with Adam Ronis, who I still do my Monday night show with. That's Lisa Ann Does Fantasy every Monday, 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. Eastern time on Fantasy Sports Radio. And so Adam and I met. And ironically, Adam's from Queens, and he's the Cowboys fan. So we
Didn't know
had
that.
this instant connection. He also loves basketball, and he knew that I would pick up fantasy basketball very easily because I follow basketball. And basketball is a sport that I can have a game on every night. I don't care who's playing. I just like the sounds of the game. It reminds me very much of that time in my childhood where that was our getting out. That was our social life. That was our downtime. That encompassed so much for me that when I hear those sounds coming from the TV in my house, I'm in this place of comfort, right? And there's certain players that you just like watching, whether they're scrappy, whether they're good for the three-point line, whether, you know, there's a rivalry. There's always some sort of drama in basketball, more so than football, because you get to know the players more because they're not covered by a helmet, right? You see them. You really know what they look like, their facial expressions when they're smack talking each other. So then I started this show. It was September 9th of 2013 was my first show. And my first year was a one-year contract. And my best friend said to me, she said, well, you could either be a flash in the pan for the year or you could be too good that they can't fire you. And that was really the plan for me. You know, I was still in the business at the time. I was trying to find what my next walk of life was going to be, how I was going to reinvent myself, what I could do. What I realized was a lot of the guys that I already followed me and a lot of the people that already followed me, we talked about sports here and there on different interviews that I did, but they played fantasy sports. They played DFS. They were doing this before we even had our first conversation about it. So it was very neat to see, you know, I run a DraftKings challenge every night when I do a show. So on Monday night, I do one. I do one for my Thursday morning. I do one for Friday night. And it's amazing to fill up a 200-person challenge in a couple of hours. That showed me right away, like, whoa, I'm going to be able to still stay so engaged with people that I've met, you know, at a club, you know, 5-6 years ago or here, and then I can still picture them. But now here we are, we're rallying in a fantasy baseball challenge, or we're rallying in a fantasy football league. And that's been really neat to see how, though I've completely switched roles in life, I've been able to really web, you know, my following into stay with me. And now we can still engage in something together.
That's fantastic. I think it's really interesting that it shows your great character and your hard work and your to go attitude, because you actually went and spent 6 months preparing. Now you had that pre-radio experience you talked about, yet you learned fantasy, you were dedicated, and obviously you took off like a bolt of lightning, and of course, and quickly. I mean, that's really a great testitude to your abilities.
And I enjoy it. And, and I also realized that one of the things that was probably holding me back as I was kind of going back and forth on things that I wanted to do, if I wanted to stay in the adult industry, if I wanted to dabble in this, what do I want to do? And I realized, like, I got to an age where my brain needed to be more massaged than ever. And once I started doing these shows and these leagues, I realized I had this thirst for, like, good hosts and good shows and good production value and good writers. And I started realizing there's not enough time in a day to absorb all of this great information that, again, is out there for you, right? A good writer. I remember when I read Matthew Berry's book, and it was comical. He put a lot of humor into it. He taught me a lot of how people drafted and how they picked their league order and what he knows about fantasy and how he learned fantasy. And it built a kind of bond with him. I realized there was that connection because of his sense of humor. Then I started watching his show, and I'm like, yeah, that's just what he was like in the book. There is just, when you start doing something new and you realize that your brain was thirsty, you really needed to challenge yourself again. You had hit a point of stagnant. Mm-hmm. It's like a life support. You come to life again, and now you're like, oh, I just want to get better. I want to be funnier. I want to be better with my information. I want to study more intensely. I want to be ahead of the game. And it helps. It helps, like, even though if things weren't the way they were right now, we had more news. But right now it's not football season. But we know every Saturday night I'm going to listen to Bob and Mike, the football diehards. I'm going to listen to them Sunday morning when I take my walk. So we have a way to stay engaged with football news on a weekly. So you're like, kind of feeding it to yourself little bits at a time until we start to really step on the gas in July. And then, it's like, that's all you're listening to. Right now I get to dilly-dally. I watch a lot of golf. Golf is a sport that I love to watch golf. And I can't wait till later in life. I mean, I'm finishing my second book right now. I want to get a little bit more planted in this world. And I say 50 is probably a good age. That'll be 2 years for me. But I want to start taking lessons. I want to start getting out there and doing golf events with friends, with friends. It's a great way to see your friends, and you're out in the nature all day. And every time I hear Mike Dempsey talk about it, I want to play even more. But, you find, like, I found that the thirst for the information that I'm getting is so fun. And it's better. You feel better about doing a show when you have the information. So the desire to study is really just to feel like I'm giving everybody what they really need.
Yeah, that's some excellent points. You won the charity league in Sirius Radio recently, or a couple of years ago?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
A couple of years ago. Yes. That was a good year for me. I think I took like 4 that year. And you know how you do well? Like this year I got the championship in 3 leagues, and I got knocked out by like less than 2 points in all of them. After all that work, you get knocked out by less than 2 points. But I did win the charity league and got to have my name engraved on that trophy, which was very exciting.
Wow. It's fun to win those big ones. There's a lot of attention to them, and hopefully the charity's got a lot of inputs, some money.
Yeah. It's a good way to do it. I'll never really play fantasy to win money for myself, but if I get into a league where there's a buy-in, my rule is it has to be a charity league.
That's fantastic. It's a good idea.
It's just easier that way. You shouldn't be looking to do this. I mean, I understand some people can make a business of it, but I'm not looking to do this. I want to be good at it. And sometimes being good at it as a host is about making the wrong decision for your lineup, so that later on when you do your show, you could really talk about how you made that decision, why you made that decision. It really helps others instead of them thinking that there's this divide between a host and themselves. We're all doing the same thing. We're all gathering data and trying to make the best decision.
Well, that's an excellent point, because if you're showing them how you do it and then here's your decision, they understand the process, because the probability of predicting the future to a high degree, I mean, we can predict it to 70% or so. There's always this amount of unpredictability. That's why we watch the games. That's why it's fun.
Yep.
Sometimes the customers come back and say, oh, you got it wrong. Yeah, you do get it wrong. That's why we play it again.
Yeah.
So understanding your process is a really good, important thing to teach them.
And when people say, oh, this host got it wrong, I say, well, you know what? The airlines got it wrong because 300 flights were delayed yesterday. And you know what? The weather person got it wrong because there wasn't a storm in Florida. Okay, like when you talk about probability, we're not the only ones gathering data and trying to make the best decision with that data that can still go wrong.
I think most of the viewers and listeners understand that. Sometimes you end up seeing, a few emails or whatever that is a little disappointing, but 99.9% of the time the people are good and they understand and they're excited and they want the information. Yeah. And tell us, you mentioned you're on your second book. Tell us about your writing. I didn't know you were a writer.
So I wrote a first book that I released December of 2015. It's called The Life. You can get The Life at my store, which is thelifelisaann.com. That was really about my journey from getting into the business to getting into sports radio. So it was from that start to that start. And from 2015 to 2020, I've had more self-discovery than I've ever had in my life. And ironically, part of that self-discovery was going through a very turbulent time and taking time to really learn and fall into some documentaries that then put me into some books. And then those books helped me kind of think things through. And one of them, not sure if you've heard of this, it's called The Minimalists. It's on Netflix, and it's all about minimalism. These two guys, Josh and Ryan, they're so unbelievable. And it made me really rethink so much about how I was living my life. Like, it's easy when you make money to spend money, and it's easy when you're making money to look at things that you think you want as that's what you're going to do when you make more money, right? Everybody wants a bigger house. They want more things. And that becomes this vicious cycle. Well, what's the point? Now you're still breaking even, right? You're still in this space. And I changed my whole thought process, and that was what made me move back to New York this year. So I moved in December full time. And I moved from a 4,000 square foot home that I owned that I'd lived in since 2005
Whoa.
to a 1,000 square foot apartment. And I didn't want to have storage in Los Angeles. And, Bob Harris was a big proponent of this. He was like, this is fantastic. This is going to simplify your life. And, but for some reason, we're all trained to believe as we're growing up and we're making more money, this is what we do. And so it took me I mapped it out. It took me probably about 6 months to get down 75% of my personal belongings. But with that changed mindset, everything is so much easier, all the way down to this scenario that we're in right now. The fact that we're shut down, I need so much less than I used to. I can live so much more simple than I used to, and I do have everything I need. And so when I see people really barking about, oh, we're having this shutdown, well, nothing should be really any different. You can still go to the store for necessities. You can still go to a pharmacy. But what really is it that you need externally that's satisfying you, other than the fact that you're not sick? You shouldn't be worried about anything. No. We're healthy. I hear people complain like, you're not sick. Like, that's the missing element here, remembering. And so this 5 years, I wrote everything from that point break of the transition from the industry to radio, what I've learned from working around a different type of person. And I can say this, fantasy sports, this, but also at SiriusXM, and from the whole life that I'd lived before this, though I had met nice people, I didn't always work around nice people. I didn't always work around honest people. I worked in a lot of environments where I didn't really feel safe, where I didn't really feel people had my best interest at heart. And looking at it, big picture, that's common in businesses where people are more in and out. There's not as much consistency. You're at a club. They're not going to see these same girls for years. They're not building a relationship. So it's very different. Nothing against it, but it's a more come and go mindset. And I kind of stepped into this very kind, comfortable, helpful. Everyone gave me a password to their sites to access information. Everyone sent me links on these are the easiest places to find these stats that you need. Adam Ronis for 3 years sat down with me for 2 hours before every single Monday night show and sat with me and went through our rundown. I would write out an injury report. He would tell me which ones were important, which ones were. He would talk with me about pronunciation. These were people that I had not known my whole life that were giving me their time. And I'm not stupid. The most valuable resource we have is our time. The fact that you're just offering it to me out of the kindness of all your hearts just to make someone better was like so game changing.
Wow.
Like in life, I understand the theory of like born again, right?
Uh-huh.
Because it's a pivotal change that changes how you look at everything. So coming into this world and seeing everything so differently, it maybe stopped me in my tracks and it made me just take inventory in a different way. And one day I was talking to my boss, our boss, Matt Deutsch, and I said, I really like everybody that I work with so much. Everyone's been offering me so much insight. And I also listen to everybody's shows and I'm taking notes. I wanted to be smoother. I love how certain hosts can be telling a story and then weave it into the fiber of the next sports topic like it never even happened.
Wow.
I was fascinated by all this. And he said to me, Lisa, when you hire good people, they'll do anything you need because they want to be better. That was just his thing. When you hire good people, everything will be okay. And I realized like that was so right. So these 5 years in this book is going to be that powerful reminder that it is never too late to change your mind on some decisions you already made. Wow. It's never too late to adopt some new practices into your life. I mean, Bob Harris introduced the concept of me trying a plant-based diet, and I was open and receptive to it, and I've been doing it ever since, and I've never felt better. But I think we can reach a point of stubbornness where we think we have everything we need. And meanwhile, we have a bunch of stuff, but we don't really have new tools. We need to sharpen our tools or get new tools, try new things, learn something new, evolve. And so these 5 years have been the most evolutionary years of my life and have set me up to the point where I finally feel like the rest of my life is going to be so much easier.
That's a fantastic story. It's hard for people to change, and like you said, you had to really focus and look back and take the time to recognize where you really wanted to go now, and then you have to go there. That's fantastic. Oh, Billions. You got the spot on Billions. Tell us about that.
Yes. So Billions is one of my favorite shows. And, nothing's better than getting the invite to do a cameo on one of your favorite shows. And this went down in a very unique way. Dan Soder, who's a comedian, has a special right now on Netflix. He also has a show on Sirius XM. He's in this show. He's Mafi. And so the season before, there was a fleshlight that was brought out, and Mafi said, oh, that's Lisa Ann's fleshlight. And I reached out to them and everyone with the group and was like, really? This is how I'm going to get a mention on the show? Like, this is such a cheap way out. I'm not even on. I want to be on. And so the next season, they made it happen, and I got to play a cameo. And when I was getting the script information, I said, please only give me what I need to see, because I don't want to have information that my friends are asking me, what's the storyline? Who do you help? I don't want to know who I'm helping. I need to still be in suspense, yet be on the show. So it was just the lines that I needed to remember, and I had no idea how I fit into the show until I actually watched it. Season 4, episode 7, and it was very exciting to learn that I am for sure Team Axe.
So what was it like, worrying about your lines? Am I going to get them wrong? And did they do a lot of takes? How was that?
It was such a short 1 or 2 lines for each of us, me and 2 other girls. I've done much bigger projects. I've done some other SAG projects as well. And I've also done, storyline movies. Like, when the Hustler and Ellen Palin movie came out, I got a script this thick the day before that I had to memorize. And there were going to be like 60 people in the room during our dialogue from mainstream media who wanted to be a part of like E! Channel, TMZ, this and that. So in my mind, I'm like, I can't look like an idiot. I have to memorize all this. And for a long time, what I would do is I would record myself in my phone and then just go for a walk or a drive and just re-listen to the recording.
Oh.
Because what I learned is I can watch a movie once and go to watch it the second time and realize I memorized the whole movie, like I know the lines in the movie. So it doesn't take me long, but I have to hear it. That's how it really resonates. So once I learned that, anything that I want to memorize, I just record into my phone and just listen to on repeat.
That's a good idea. By the way, you mentioned Sarah Palin. That was a brilliant idea. That was a fantastic idea.
It's a brilliant idea. It was a brilliant idea. And you know what? Again, one of the things I've been gifted with in life that I've actually been writing a bit about, I'm going to blog about it this week. I've been writing about that during this downtime is timing. My timing in life has been unusually incredible. Like, I'm happier to be in New York during this crisis than in LA. Where I was living in LA, we were starting to have homeless living in the underground parking. There were a lot of elements that I was afraid of. I'm also starting to get afraid of earthquakes. Like if all of that happened at one time, what would we do? Now I'm in a building with security and doormen. So like I'm good. I have less bathrooms that could leak to need to call a plumber, like timing. So you ask about, what was your question? I'm so sorry.
I forgot myself, but I was just
timing.
Asking. Yeah, the timing. But that's fantastic. Well,
I wouldn't.
Sarah Palin was a great idea.
So timing. Oh, great. So timing.
Of Sarah Palin.
I wouldn't do something like that now because I feel like people are a little bit too hostile about politics and it wouldn't be fun. No. So again, my timing, like I had this talk with a friend of mine the other night. I said, I was really lucky because it was fun. It was campy. It wasn't too nasty, over the top. No one got offended. But people also weren't as emotionally invested. People weren't spending all day on Facebook talking about politics. Yeah. This Sarah Palin thing happened. It was cute. It was fun, and it was done. But if this was this year and the same thing happened, we would have never been able to do it.
That's interesting. That's an excellent point. Well, by the way, not to mention myself or whatnot, but I try and keep as quiet as possible with these, but you mentioned doing that show. My wife and I, as a hobby, do extras in movies here in Albuquerque.
I love it!
We don't have to talk, which is beautiful.
That's right.
Because I've never done it, and I'm not kidding. We were on
And you get residuals.
No, we don't. Not as an extra.
No? Okay. Okay.
It's the lowest form of life. But we were on Better Call Saul. She was on. I was on for a microsecond. And
I hear that show is so good.
It's a fun show. It's a slow show, which is so different than a lot of them. These things are so fast-paced. It's a real slow show, but they bring these characters in. They're getting close to the end. I think next year is the last
It's a little violent, though.
Yeah, but most of the time it's not, actually. Most of the time it's not. And then we were on, what's it called? Messiah. We got on Messiah last year, and it just aired a few months ago. We were in the trial scene. And
that's fantastic.
She was on a couple times. I wasn't on the whole day. I was sitting around in the back room, just bored as heck for 12 hours.
It's just sitting around and wait. I mean, it is the best time to read a book is when you're on set.
Try and do homework
Yeah, everyone has to be quiet. So you don't even want to be tapping away if they're shooting close to the room where you are. Oh, yeah. So I just remember reading so many books sitting on set.
That's a good idea. We were, at the end of the day, we all went in and we were all the guest portion of the trial, and the judge was going to make his decision, and we just sat down. We were tired, and they were moving people around. And the guy walked up to us and looked at us, and he said, "You guys switch." We switch. I don't care. And he moved the person in front of us, and all of a sudden, at the very end, they brought one of the main characters and plopped him right in front of us. And I went, "Oh no!" Because in this show, we had to act surprised and then be excited. We weren't talking. We were kind of going, and it's an extra, but we didn't just have to sit there. We had to actually do something. And this guy, we're on film. And they do 20 takes.
Were you nervous?
Yeah, I was going, oh crap, I got to do this 20 times in a row. And sure enough, we were on. But it was just entertainment for a day. We do one every once in a while. and it's fun.
It's
fun to
it's
watch.
a great thing. It's a great thing for you to do because you know how when crews would be in your area, they're not all the time. So it's something that
Yeah,
you can plan for. It's something that you can do. It gets you out. You probably meet new people.
yeah.
But that's great. I'm glad you
It was
do
fun.
that.
It's fun to watch. How much
How
is
it's done.
into a game. I mean, they have into filming. They have multiple cameras, multiple people running around. I
Oh my
cannot
gosh.
believe to do a 5 minute
The
scene.
moment I love the most is right before they're getting ready to start to shoot a scene. Out of nowhere come 30 to 40 people. Everybody has one job. They're checking if your watch is all in the same time. One person is checking your earrings. Make sure nothing. Is your necklace exactly right here? There's one person and then they all disappear. Those people fascinate me.
Yeah, the whole thing's fun. They'll, the main characters when they're doing prep, they'll have somebody sitting in for them.
Yes.
And then they come in at the last minute, and it's just really a blast to do them. After we do one, we're like, let's don't do one for a while because it's so exhausting, and I'm
It's
old
long
and whatnot.
days.
But they're really a blast. I'm glad we stuck our neck out and did that and had fun. It's just an
Good.
extra, but it's an entertainment value that counts. I apologize
Yeah.
for talking about myself. I usually don't do that.
No, not at
So
all.
one thing you mentioned earlier, which I think
I
is
hear
interesting.
knocking at your door. Who's coming in?
Oh, I was just knocking on the table. Sorry, nobody.
Oh.
I was interested. You talked about way back when you were young and how huge fans were back then, pre-fantasy popularity. And now, of course, fantasy is just consumed by most NFL watchers. Have you noticed a difference in fans back when, the difference of how they said, fantasy is going to ruin football because you like more than one team, and now you watch everything. Is that bad, you think, or is it okay?
I think what's really been interesting is the equalizer has been sports gambling. And you remember 4 years ago when FanDuel and DraftKings were being dragged through the mud and in and out of court to just legalize DFS. Yes, their marketing may not have been on point because they didn't have disclaimers and disclosures and all these things, but there was that strange conversation, and then next thing you know, sports betting is being legalized state by state, and now nobody seems to care anymore. If they're allowed to gamble, they don't care if they're gambling against their own team. If they think their team is going to lose and they can win money, all of a sudden it doesn't matter of who your alliance is. So I see a balance of both. What I see with the younger generation is it really has helped the branding, the influencer work, and the external marketing for athletes. Because a lot of young people that play fantasy sports become super fans of individual athletes. This makes that athlete, like Giannis Antetokounmpo in basketball, so highly sought after. Then everybody goes out and buys his jersey. Well, guess what? If you put a yogurt in Giannis's hands, people are going to buy that too. So I think what fantasy does for the younger generation who they're cord cutters, they're not watching every game, they're not as big, but they are on their social media, all their Snapchat. I mean, Giannis released it on Snapchat that he was in the hospital having his girlfriend was having a baby in the morning. ESPN didn't find out till the afternoon. One of my friends that's younger that follows Giannis on Snapchat's like, I don't think Giannis is going to play tonight. He's in the hospital. His girl's having a baby. I'm like, what? This isn't even news yet. He's like, what do you mean? We already know it's on Snapchat. So what I think it's doing, a lot of us don't see because we're not on every single platform. We're not watching everybody's Instagram live videos, but the younger generation is doing that before they turn on the television. So many of my younger friends don't even have cable at all. They don't have a TV screen. They just use their computer. They're fine seeing on this side screen. It's us sports lovers like that want the 75-inch TV. I can't live without it. To them, that's just stuff, and they'll watch. They're fine watch. They watch everything on their computer. They'll watch it on their phone, which to me, the worst. So I think we saw a little hiccup maybe 5 years ago where people were like, this is going to ruin the game. Then places like NFL Network and then media that gets the red zone going, and everybody realized we can capitalize on this because now there is a need to be showing all point scoring action in every NFL game at one time. There's a need for the Sunday ticket. There's a need for the NBA League Pass because these people want to see edited versions of their games. Like, it expanded so much, and like anything, there's always that, like, right when it cracks. And then I'm looking at my younger friends and how differently they consume. They don't watch as many games as we do for sure, right? But they play every fantasy sport. All my friends, my younger friends, play fantasy basketball and football and some baseball because to them that's how they stay engaged with knowing what the score is and who they're playing is how they follow the stats kind of in reverse. You know what I'm saying? We watch
That's
the
wild.
games first, we look later. They're in total reverse.
Wow.
And they're viewing things very differently than we are. They're viewing things through shorter applications, different clips. I'll say some of the broadcasting networks have started to do incredible jobs at really finding out how do we cater to them? What do we put on YouTube? What do we put on Hulu? How much do we have on Instagram Live? What do we do on Facebook Live? Because they're realizing these are all free platforms for us to utilize to, bring people in. But they're also realizing if we don't do this, we're not going to have a following.
That's a good point. The social media is very important. That's an excellent
It is.
reminder. So any final thoughts that you have about?
Well, first I want to say thank you to you for being so kind to me since we've met. Secondly, I would like to know how prepared you are to start your garden this season.
Not very prepared. I was just thinking we were a little late getting the small ones together when you just plant from seed. So we better hurry up because we can plant in a month, in 4 weeks.
Yeah, well, I wanted to ask you, you still have Home Depots open and everything, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So you better go and get that now. Now it's interesting. Home Depot, I just found out because I'm trying to convince my girlfriend to start a garden while she's off from the school year, and I found out Home Depot is a necessity business because plumbers, contractors, everything else. And so whatever plants they have, they're still going to have so she can start to get some seedlings. But so I want to hear about your garden because Bob always tells me about it.
My wife and I, we love doing the gardening, and sometimes we get crazy about it. I mean, it's not a huge garden, but we'll have 9 or 10 tomato plants, and my wife cans, and she'll can over 100 tomato plants, and we have mixed in with, we did a lot of bell peppers. We had really good crops of bell peppers, squash, zucchini, jalapenos. And ironically, my 11-year-old grandkid, step-grandkid, he lives with us. About 2 years ago, we have an almond tree. We have almond trees, and we have figs, and we've got pecans.
Does your wife make any almond milk?
No, we don't get enough to do that.
Okay.
We do drink almond milk, by the way.
Okay.
So he comes out, he goes, I said, what do you want in this year in the garden? He goes, I want nuts. I'm like, well, we got all these nut trees. What do you he says, I want peanuts. And very similar to how you say about people change. I go, we don't want peanuts. We've got nut trees. And I said, wait a minute, Emil, why not peanuts? So we put in peanuts, and now we have a staple of peanuts every year, and it's hilarious. And they do okay.
Such a simple thing. You might not know, but I grew up having a huge garden.
Oh.
Both of my parents had a huge garden, and we had acres of land, and then also we farmed other acres of land.
Wow.
So my life was spent all the way down to, as a young girl, my dad having me read the Farmer's Almanac because he would want to predict what big storms would be coming through. And if there were to be a big storm, like in August when we would go away for our family vacation, he wouldn't want to have corn. Like some years we would skip planting corn because of the storm season. Because, it's so frustrating. Wow. You take up all this space in your garden for corn, then it gets knocked down by a big storm and you have nothing that's usable. So we would save that spot of the garden for something else. We grew everything from rhubarb to eggplant to, and we canned. So I could go to a friend's house and know whether her mom used frozen or canned vegetables, to an insulting level. I was spoiled on fresh fruits and vegetables. And there were things that scarred me when I moved out on my own and I realized a cucumber was $1. I could have lost my mind because when you start to plant and you think, well, I don't know how this plant's going to take off. I don't know if this tomato plant's going to yield much, cherry tomatoes. And the next thing you know, boom, you're trying to give them away to your neighbors and they're going bad, right? You can't even can them fast enough. Couldn't even can them fast enough. And so there would be that. We always had so many cucumbers and I thought, I will never waste a cucumber again. But life goals later on down the road when I'm not living in a city and maybe I'm retired or I'm living in a home, that is a big goal of mine. 2 things I'd love to have, a dog and a garden.
Wow. That's a great story. It's good for us because, in our business, long periods of time, with the fantasy football business, you can't just say, I'm going to take 3 or 4 days off or a week off. So
No.
kind of our vacation is walking into the backyard and checking out the garden
Yeah.
and picking a few things. And it's that break. You got that quick escape from your work for 15 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever it is.
And you know what? You're self-sufficient as well. You can survive out of your own yard. I mean, there's a huge value to that. When you read an article that says if you go to the store right now and buy a tomato, know that it's probably been touched by at least 100 people before you
Ouch.
touched it. Wouldn't you rather walk into your backyard and get a tomato?
And the fun thing is we eat a lot of salads now. We've changed our diet a lot. And it's so fun to be able to put cucumbers, tomatoes, various things from the garden in it. You just like a fresh tomato in a salad is like, wow, it's just such a great summer when you're being, even the canned ones, but the fresh really makes the food a lot more enjoyable.
Oh, when you pick a couple and just put them on your kitchen counter for a couple hours before you're going to use them and they're still like a little warm, real fresh cut tomatoes have a scent.
Uh-huh.
You can buy tomatoes at the grocery store and they have no scent. It's so
point.
true. But, well, listen, you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
And for sure know that once we get through all of this, we are going to be celebrating by, I'm sure Mike Dempsey will probably be in 200 best ball leagues this year. Bob Howard will go to 400 more concerts. I mean, there's so many things we're all going to do once we can get out
there. Well, it's a congratulations because you're truly a pioneer of fantasy sports, and more than that, because I'm really proud of how you have, your hard work and your dedication and what you do, and how you can go in and be successful at something, even not been involved in it for a long time. That's really a fantastic ability that you have, and congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I hope I didn't take too much of your time. And
not at all. It was a blast. Have a great rest of your day, okay?
Yeah, keep in touch, and I hope everything turns out well here for everybody here soon.
I'm sure it will in time.